Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Laprade. Welcome to the CBI, the Capacity Building Institute. We get together here every single month and talk about a new topic. And today I'm so excited because we're talking about fundraising, which is my favorite. I'm so excited to have all of you here. I love seeing where all of you are coming from. I'm going to be checking the chat out and seeing where you're joining from. I'm in beautiful Ottawa, Anishinaabe territory. Thank you so much for stewarding this land so beautifully. Tell me where you are in the country. Fredericton, New Brunswick, yay! I'm so excited to see Danielle here today. Thank you so much. I wanted to spend lots of time today talking about fundraising, but before I want to introduce our friend Julie Breslin. She's going to tell us more about the Capacity Building Institute, and then we'll be back with Krystyn Tully to talk all things fundraising. Okay, stay with us, everyone. Over to you, Julie.
Okay. Hey, I'm Julie. I'm the Sustainable Development Engagement Intern for CBI. And CBI is a nonprofit organization with the mission to provide equal opportunity and access to capacity building training to every small shop nonprofit environmental leader across Canada. Our training focuses on 6 core capacity building themes: financial management and fund development, governance and board development, volunteer engagement and human resources, communications and outreach, risk management and legal issues, leadership and organizational culture. Our current running programs are the Capacity Building Webinar Series. It happens every 4th Wednesday of the month. And currently, our Capacity Building Certificate program for 2024 is closed. However, we are doing a alumni networking event June 18th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you are an alum of the CBCP, check your email in the next week for more information on that. Currently, our internship training program in collaboration with Eco Internships is still open. So for more information, visit our website at capacitybuilding.ca and ecointernships.ca. Finally, our Engaging Senior Leaders pilot program is concluding in June. And for the last major event, we've teamed up with SCO and the NCENN to host a meeting on senior leaders in the environment. It's June 14th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and it's on Zoom. Okay. We are so lucky to have fabulous trainers. All our trainers have at least 10 years of experience in their respective fields. They are Sam Laprade, Rob Barnes, Barb King, Alex Keenan, and for this year, we are happy to introduce Dwayne Taylor. His expertise is in equity, diversity, and inclusion and organizational culture. He has done some previous webinars for us in the past, and they are available to watch on our YouTube channel. Thank you to our funders and supporters. We would not be able to do our work without you, and we are very appreciative of your support. And lastly, if you would like to connect with us, you can email us at info@capacitybuilding.ca, visit our website at capacitybuilding.ca, call us at 613-663-2553, or you can visit us in person at 136F Billings Avenue in Ottawa, Ontario. We are in the office from Monday to Thursday. And lastly, save the date. Our next capacity building webinar is June 26th, 2024 at 4 p.m. and you can register at our website. Thank you so much.
Great job, Julie. Thank you so much for sharing all that great information about the CBI. This is probably my 3rd or 4th year involved, and I always learn something from all of our guests. And I'm so excited to welcome Krystyn Tully. Hello, Krystyn. Where are you?
Hello, greetings
Hello.
from Montreal, Chichoge. It's nice to see you and to be here with everyone.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much for joining from Montreal. We have some people joining from all over the country. Lots of people here in the Ottawa area. Toronto's zipped in. The odd time we get somebody from around the world as well. So it's always exciting to have everybody here. And Krystyn, we're talking about something so important today, how to scale your fundraising. This is a huge question. You're going to provide lots of answers. We're going to have time as well today to have a discussion between you and I, some chat, but we really want to encourage people. Some of the best questions, they don't come from me, Krystyn. They come from all of our fabulous panelists and people that are joining us today, participating in the webinar. So if you have a special question, feel free to throw it in the Q&A, and we'll gather them all up and make sure that we play a little Jeopardy with Krystyn a little bit later and get all those great answers from her as well. So Krystyn, I know you've prepared something for us today, so I'm going to turn off my camera and listen intently to you, and then we'll be back to chat, okay?
Sounds perfect.
Krystyn Tully, everyone.
All right, so you should be able to see my screen now. And yeah, we're talking about scaling fundraising, and I just want to acknowledge at the outset that there are a lot of different reasons why this topic might appeal to you. So I'm going to cover a fair bit of ground, but if you want to pop in the chat about why you're here, what your questions are, where you're coming from, and be, feel free. We do want to hear from you too. You may want to scale your fundraising because you are a one-person operation and you can't do it all anymore. You may want to scale because there are incredible opportunities in your community, people wanting to help out or fund you or support you in new ways, and you want to take advantage of those opportunities. Perhaps every single person you've ever met is already a donor to your organization, and you're trying to figure out what comes next. That's really what scaling is all about. So that's what we're talking about today. Want to be clear from the outset that scaling doesn't necessarily mean growth or bigger. Bigger isn't always better. So scaling is really about improving your performance. And when it comes to fundraising, you would measure performance typically by how much money you spend in order to raise money. So that's often like to raise $1, we spent 50 cents or 25 cents, whatever that ratio is. How much time you're spending with your staff and your volunteers in order to bring in the funds, and also what other opportunities you may have given up, what you're not doing in order to do the fundraising that you're doing. So scaling is an effort to improve your performance in these areas. It's not necessarily about bringing in more cash. It is really at the heart of it, making sure that you have as much money as possible left over for your programs. So we're called nonprofit organizations, but actually most of us are for-profit organizations. We engage in fundraising to generate a surplus of resources to spend on all this incredible work that we're doing. So we're not here to talk about big numbers. We're here to talk about program support. Just to check the math to give you a sense of what I mean by the difference between growth, big versus scaling. We have two different fundraising campaigns. One, you spend $55,000 in order to raise $100,000. So you've raised $100,000. That's a lot of money for your programs. Another campaign, you only raise $60,000. So that's less money that you've raised, but you only have to spend $5,000 in order to raise it. At the end of the day, the fundraising campaign that raised $60,000 is actually better for your organization because you raised more program money. So that's what we're aiming for today, is how do you get as much money and time as possible for your programs with the least amount of work and stress possible. If you're thinking about scaling, there's a few different ways that may be applicable to you, to your situation, to your organization. So the common thread that you're going to hear through a lot of this is more people. Scaling almost always means more people are getting involved in fundraising. That if one person has been doing everything, that's going to be divided up amongst more people. There are some opportunities for technology and software to help make that workload a bit more distributed, but we're almost always talking about getting more people involved. One way could be getting more people involved doing the same thing. So that's collaboration. So that type of scaling might be taking an event that one person is organizing and bringing a committee together to do the work together collaboratively. So that's one type of scaling. Expansion is a different type. where instead of all of the people that are working together on one thing, they're now working in parallel. So a good example of expansion would be canvas teams that are going door to door. One person can go door to door, two people can go door to door, or you might have 10 teams of 20 across the country canvassing door to door. So that's more people doing the same thing in parallel with each other. Third approach to scaling is diversification. So this is something that you may hear in your organization. We need to find other sources of revenue. We want to be more stable. We want to be more resilient. We don't want to be dependent on the same funders. Diversification means more people are doing different things. So maybe you've got one phenomenal grant writer or a grant writing team, and you want other people to start working on an individual donor campaign. It means that you're starting to pull in money from different sources, doing different activities. And then the fourth approach to scaling that might be relevant to you is delegation. So this is where you are still doing the same thing, but you're now parceling out the work amongst different people. So instead of one person carrying a project from beginning to end, maybe putting together a budget, writing a grant proposal, getting the funding, doing the project, documenting the project, writing the reports, and continuing on the relationships with the funders, instead of one person being responsible for all aspects, that work is now getting parceled out to different people. So you might have one person developing budgets and program plans, another person doing the actual grant writing, program staff implementing the program, impact staff or consultants doing the impact measurement and documentation and reporting, and either senior staff or outreach staff that are doing the partnership, relationship, and maintenance while all of that is underway. So parceling out the tasks amongst a larger group of people. So when we're talking about scaling, that's really what most organizations go through when they start to expand their fundraising. And if you are one of those people that it currently feels like everything is resting on your shoulders, really finding at least one of these four approaches is going to be a game changer for you and for your organization. Everything that we look at with fundraising is related to the fundraising cycle. CBI hosted a wonderful webinar on fundraising last year where we talked about the stages of fundraising in detail. So you may remember, if you're tune into these webinars often, you may remember the steps, but we'll go through them again quickly just to refresh your memory. Basically, all fundraising follows a similar path. The first step is when you're figuring out who you might ask for money. These are your prospects. It could be looking at a donor database. It could be the group of people who are looking at your website. So really just creating a pool of possible people who might be asked to support the cause at some point. Qualifying is the step where you prioritize. There are usually way too many people in a prospect pool for you to actually talk to. So qualifying is figuring out who's going to be the best fit or the best match with your organization, maybe an individual. Could be a foundation or a corporate sponsor, or it could be a pool of people that engage in similar behavior, like the people who are reading all the articles on your website or engaging with you on social media. Building trust is the time in the process where you get to know each other and they understand what you're all about. Sometimes that happens before they even interact with you directly. They've been looking at your website, they've been reading about you in the media. Sometimes you're the one that's directly responsible for introducing your organization and explaining what you're all about. Trust building happens over a long period of time, or it happens in the blink of an eye, depending on the nature of your relationship. The next step is asking for support. Again, it may be that you meet someone like canvassing at a door, and within 10 seconds, you're asking them to make a donation to your cause. It may be a major donor that you've met and known for 5 years, and you have established a long and lengthy friendship or relationship before you ever ask them to contribute to the cause. But you do ask someone for money. Please give us this much money in this way for this program, for this initiative. That's really what the ask is all about. And then the closing is either a yes or a no. They say, yeah, we'll support you. And then we move into stewarding the funds that they're giving to you, implementing the project or program, doing the work that you've raised money for. Or the relationship it's a no, so the relationship doesn't move forward. If it's a friendly no, they may go back into your prospect pool. It may be as simple as you ask at the wrong time. We've already given away all of our money for this year, and you're going to come back next year because you've got that strong relationship. Or it may be that there is no prospect of a future relationship with that particular donor, and you'll leave them out of the prospect pool. Once someone has committed to supporting you, you do want to report back to them. Usually the depth of reporting depends on the significance or the scale of the donation that they're giving, but there's always some kind of acknowledgement that the donation has been received, that it's appreciated, and that the work has been done. So those are the steps in the fundraising cycle. They will look familiar to most of you, I'm sure. But the reason why I think they're so helpful isn't because you don't know how to fundraise. You do, you're here, you have organizations, you have programs. The reason why I find the steps helpful is because when you're looking at growing or scaling, when you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed, it's really helpful to understand where you're stuck, where in the fundraising cycle are you running out of steam? Where are you completely overwhelmed? Where is the workload too significant? Where have you had so much success that you need to figure out how to do the work differently so that it's sustainable? Knowing where you're at in the cycle and where you need help gives you a great sense of where to focus your efforts. If it is at that prospect list stage, what might that feel like for you? If it is time to scale your prospecting, it could be because, as we said at the beginning, everyone you know is already donating to the organization. You have literally asked every single person that you can think of. You need to broaden the pool of prospects beyond the people that you know. That's one very common reason for scaling. It may be because your prospect list is getting shorter and shorter every year. So you don't have a problem right now, but you can anticipate that at some point in the future, that pool of potential donors is going to be too small. Or it may just be because every single person that's donating to your organization is coming in through a relationship with the same person. Maybe that's you. And maybe to make the organization more resilient and more future-proof, you want to make sure that there's a diversity of relationships and support coming to your organization. And then the scary time, or the time that you might be nervous about, is if you look at the prospect list and think, if 100% of the people we asked for support said yes, we still wouldn't have enough money to cover our budget for programs this year. That's a sure sign that your prospect list is too short, and you need a bigger pool of people to approach for help. So if that situation describes your situation, then you really want to look at how do you scale, get more people involved in building a bigger pool of potential donors for your organization. If you're satisfied, you got a pretty good pool of possible people, but you are a little overwhelmed and you don't know where to start. Then it's a sign that maybe you need to look at this qualifying process, which is essentially just prioritizing what is the best use of your time. You want to scale your qualifying process if your list of prospects is there, but you don't know who to talk to first, or if you don't have enough information to even make that decision. So if you don't know, for example, what all the foundations in Canada are doing, then you may want someone with some more background knowledge. Or if you don't know what donors are interested in or what appeals to them, you may want people with deeper connections in the community to come on board and to help you out here. So really scaling qualifying is when you think about prioritizing how your time is being spent. If you know how you want to spend your time, you know what you should be focusing on, you've got clarity around your priorities, you've got a good list of prospects to appeal to, the trust building process is something that may require more involvement from more people. I would even argue that this is something that you should think about scaling no matter what. Really, every single person that works for your organization, that is part of your board of directors, that volunteers for your organization, is an ambassador for your organization. Everyone who's writing content for your website, writing letters or op-eds, delivering service to clients or to people in your community, they are all representing your organization, and every action that they take is part of trust building. When people are impressed by your programs, when they see that you're generating an impact, when they're inspired by your words, you're building trust with them. So while trust building is a key component of the fundraising process and it helps you set up the ask in those relationships, it is also the core mission work that we're all doing day to day with our organizations. So thinking about how do I get more people involved in building the reputation and the credibility of our organization? How do we do work that is worthy of a good reputation? So we're not talking about spin here, we're talking about genuine commitment and respect within your community and with your peers. And you want to look at scaling if you're finding that you don't have time to build any new relationships. If you're already so busy maintaining the relationships that you have or the work that you have, thinking about how to get more people reaching out on behalf of your organization or representing your organization is a good thing to do. And at the same time, if your current relationships are fine, but you're finding that there's so many new relationships coming in that you're not able to meet new people with the same level of integrity or commitment or genuine engagement that you would have met old people with, it's a time to think about how more people can get involved in those relationships. And then also always thinking about all of your written communications, everything that interfaces between you and the world, all of those moments of contact. Those are moments of trust and trust building. Once you've got the relationship and you know it's okay to make an ask, you sort of have that feeling that the timing is right. Again, it could be years, could be minutes from the time that you've met a potential donor. Just asking for money, that takes time. And sometimes it's something very small, like the donate button on your website, where every single person who looks at that button is going to see the same thing. And sometimes the ask is incredibly customized. It might take weeks to prepare a particular pitch, a presentation, a proposal, a budget. It's kind of something that requires a lot of time investment. So even if you have a great pool of potential donors, there's a limited amount of time in the day or in the year to actually ask people to support your cause or your organization. So asking is something that you want to think about scaling when one person's responsible for 100% of the asks. That's not usually a very resilient or stable situation. You want more people having the confidence and the ability to articulate the needs of the organization. Even if you're going to get no's a few times, we still want to be able to say, this is who we are, this is what we do, these are our financial needs, and this is what we would do with your support. That's something that every board member and every staff member should be able to say, at least at the basic high level for your organization. You definitely want to scale the asking when the value of the asks that you're putting out into the world is the same or less than the amount of money that you need to raise. So if your organization needs to raise $100,000 a year in order to fund its core programs, and you've only got $25,000 worth of asks out there in the world, you pretty much know right now that you're not going to hit that fundraising target. And if you don't have any more time to get more asks out, then that's something that you definitely want to scale. You also want to scale when you have reached the point where you can clearly describe what your needs are. So it's one thing to say, oh, we need more people to help us fundraise. It's another thing to equip people with the tools and the information that they need to fundraise effectively. So while it is great practice to get people asking on behalf of your organization, hiring people to just raise money for you is not necessarily going to work very effectively. You do have to equip them with the information that they need to get the money that you need for the programs you need and to be able to make a compelling case for support for your organization. So there's a bit of legwork that's usually required here if you're doing this for the first time. Say you know who to ask, the asks are flying out the door, you've got enough money out there in the world that if people said yes, your programs would be thriving and everything is great on that front. This is a joyous moment, and any organization that has gone through a little financially supported growth spurt will have experienced the wonderful feeling that comes with being able to focus on your programs and thinking about actually doing work with the support and the resources you need to do that work well. But it sometimes comes just before a moment where stewarding the funder relationships takes so much more work than you anticipated that you find you're somehow still feeling like you don't have enough time to do the work that you want to be doing. So stewarding is a moment that you might need to look at scaling when you just don't have enough time to do the work and maintain healthy, genuine relationships with your donors, whether they're individual donors or foundation donors. So again, if you're spending most of your time maintaining current relationships, you want to look at being able to scale the relationship stewardship experience for your organization. Or if you're finding that you're constantly trying to evaluate, should I be spending time updating a donor on work that we're doing? Or should I be Should I be in the field doing the actual program work that they funded? And you're feeling really caught between two very noble priorities. That's a sign that you might need to get more people involved. People doing the program work, people handling the relationships, and keeping the community updated. So that's the stewarding phase. Reporting. This is usually thought of as the last phase of the fundraising relationship. But I like to think of it as the first phase of the next relationship. So reporting may be as formal as a funder from a foundation giving you a document saying, we require you to fill out this funding report for us. Here's all of the information we require. Here is the deadline. Reporting may be as formal as your annual report that you publish for the world so that they can see what you've been up to, the financial health of your organization, your mission, your program priorities, et cetera. Or it could be extremely informal. And ideally, you've got a combination of all of the above. So informal reporting is the process of letting donors know when good things happen that day. Your foundation, you're funding our restoration project. We were in the field today, and here are just a couple of quick shots of some of the incredible moments that we had with the students and volunteers who were part of this restoration project. Or we got a win in this court case, or this beautiful testimonial from one of our clients just arrived and we want to share it with you. It's just making sure that the people who are enabling the work feel connected and up to date on what's happening. If they are part of a foundation or a family or a corporate sponsor or any kind of environment where someone might wonder how their charitable dollars or their community investment is being spent, you want to make sure that they always have enough information to participate in any conversation. Well, where did you donate again? Oh yeah, I give money to that organization. Or, oh, look, in the newspaper, we see this organization's name. We're donors, we're members, and just feel that sense of connection and familiarity with your programs. You don't want them to really just hear from you once a year when it's time to ask for more money. That connection is part of that trust building. The other piece of reporting to think about scaling and to think about making those next asks easier is that if it is a funder that will renew their support, a foundation or an individual that's been donating for a period of time, when you're updating them on the work that has been done, it's not just about, yeah, we did this, we did this, we did this. You're also building the case for support for what is going to come next. We did this and it worked so well that now we have the opportunity to do this. We did this and the public response was so positive that demand for this program has actually skyrocketed and we need more money than we did in the past. We did this and it didn't actually accomplish the goal that we thought it would accomplish. Here's what we've learned and here's what the community really needs. So when you're reporting, you're providing them with all the information that they need in order to understand what support or action is required next. Reporting is sometimes, it feels like it's one of the hardest things to scale, especially for a smaller shop organization where you're doing the work so you know what to talk about. On the other hand, it's one of the steps that you should think about scaling first so that you can bake into your internal processes the practice of identifying what it is that you're measuring or reporting on, figuring out how to tell your organization's own story. When we talked about equipping more people to make the ask, this is a great step in that process is here's what we do and here's how it makes a difference. So you want as many people as possible to be able to tell these stories. So think about scaling as quickly as possible, at least some little piece of your reporting process. Think about scaling reporting when one person is doing the project work from beginning to end. That's something that you don't want to bake into your organization's model if you can avoid it. Think about scaling your reporting when the reports that you plan on writing aren't making it out the door. So they're either not making it out the door at all or not making it out the door on time. That's when you definitely want to think about how to get more help preparing those, or when informal updates aren't being shared. So if you don't have enough time to let donors or supporters know what's happening, find ways to make time either by getting more people involved in the reporting or getting people to cover other tasks and responsibilities so that you're able to provide those informal updates, build trust, and maintain the relationships. Scaling is great. It's necessary. There are some things that you may not expect. So you might think, oh, this is great. We're going to scale our programs and we're going to raise more money and I'm going to work reasonable hours and life is going to be wonderful. A couple of things to be prepared for. They're not challenges, they're just things that you may not anticipate if you haven't gone through the process before. One is your startup costs. So we talked about that ratio at the beginning. How much money are you spending in order to raise X dollars? It's not going to be perfect every time. So for example, whenever you do something for the first time, it's probably going to be more expensive and it's probably going to take longer. If you are hiring a grant writer for the very first time, then that first grant that they write is going to be pretty expensive when you look at your financial statements, because it's the very first time that you've had that contract or that salary on your books. But if that grant writer succeeds in getting 10 grants or 15 grants, then the incremental cost of all those other grants is much, much smaller. So don't think about it necessarily as a project by project basis. Think about it over the course of 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, and just be prepared for the initial startup costs, for time and money to be there. The other thing about scaling is that it's not as linear as people might be expecting it to be. It's not like we do this step and then this step and then this step and then this step, and it's all neat and organized and predictable. Costs will leap at certain points. So for example, hiring that first grant writer, and then that cost doesn't change until that grant writer can't write any more grants and you're hiring a second one, and then that cost will leap up again. If you do events, you may have experienced the fact that you can add one more person to an event, no big deal, until you reach that sweet spot where all of a sudden your venue is not big enough and you have to move to a different venue. And that new venue costs so much more than the old venue, or requires more staff, is more difficult to manage. So you will hit these little points in the scaling process where the costs didn't change that much, and then they'll leap up because you're at the next level. So those are the nonlinear finances associated with scaling, as some of you may experience. And then mentally, when it comes to scaling, the biggest pattern really, if you are someone who's been doing a lot of this work yourself, or your team has been doing a lot of the work themselves, is shifting from the doing to managing mentality. It will be a big change. A lot about how you work and how you instruct or guide or collaborate with others will shift when you are enabling them to be part of this fundraising cycle on behalf of your organization. There may be things that you have been doing instinctively and intuitively, if you're the one that's been doing this work, that figuring out how to explain to someone else may be more challenging than you expect. How do you know how much money to ask for? Or if you're in a meeting with a potential funder and you're figuring out what they're interested in, how do you know which program to pitch or present to them? Someone that is part of all aspects of an organization's life can pretty easily pull from 4 or 5 or 6 different projects on the fly in a meeting. A dedicated fundraiser who's in their first week on the job with your organization isn't necessarily going to have that depth of knowledge. It will come, and it's worth persisting, but just recognizing that you are shifting from doing to managing, and there's a lot that comes with that. And you want to make sure you got the mentality that you need to embrace it. You've got the systems in place and the resources in place for people to succeed, and that you are prepared to take the time that it takes in order to build a team of fundraisers, as opposed to 1 or 2 people carrying the weight themselves. The benefit, of course, of doing this is that you end up with an organization where the fundraising is more diversified. The responsibility is shared by more people. So that feeling of being burdened or stuck, if you're the only one doing the work, is all of a sudden not on your shoulders anymore. And it makes the work much more enjoyable. And you're sharing the good times, you're sharing the stresses, and we've also baked in a lot of opportunities to celebrate wins and victories and tell impact stories. And that's something that is really one of the most enjoyable parts of sharing fundraising work amongst a team, is when you get to celebrate all the good work that's being done. So that's kind of where we wanted to get to in terms of covering off what the steps of fundraising are, what scaling is, and where you might want to scale or think about scaling in your organization. And I'm going to stop screen sharing now, but you can see ways to contact me if you'd like to afterwards, and I'll share a copy of the presentation if it's helpful. And I will hand the reins over to Sam.
That was awesome. What an incredible, I mean, you packed a lot into that, an incredible half hour. I don't know if you know, but how quickly that went by for all of us, because there was just information after information. So definitely a lot to digest, but certainly lots of really interesting points. One word that I heard from you so much, Krystyn, we want to get the questions, of course, of everybody attending as well today, but I'm going to jump in with my own. I heard you use the word trust a lot, and I think it's such an important word. Um, Coming out of the pandemic, um, just things have changed, and you used it in terms of board, you used it in front of your team, bringing other people on. Why do you think the word trust is so key when we're undertaking something like this? Because for me, I want to hold on. I don't want to give anybody my database. I don't want anybody to dig around in the stuff I've done. But it takes a lot of trust to invite others in.
Yeah. Gosh, that's a good question. I have a few different answers. One is because there is a small scale that an organization can operate at the community level, where one person really can drive everything. But what that organization does is going to have to stay inside a box that's manageable for that one leader. So I don't want to dismiss instances where that's appropriate for a community. But for most nonprofit organizations that I interact with, that's not the goal. The goal was not to have one person doing everything forever until they can't do it anymore. So the doing everything yourself, in the early days, the people who are capable of doing that usually make very powerful and compelling and passionate founders and leaders. And then an organization calcifies around that one person. And that's when you see really great people burning out. And that's when you see leaders that feel stuck and no longer like they're there because of passion or because of love, but because they think that they can't leave, or there's no other option, or there's no other way of doing things. And that's when the spark for the individual as well as the creativity starts to fade. And then frankly, no one looks at that job and thinks, I want to do that. So then you start getting into like leadership and succession issues, because the next generation of potential leaders is looking at that situation thinking, that's not for me. So if an organization is going to serve a larger community and survive over a long period of time and allow the people who work there to be healthy and creative and grow as individuals, the only way to do it is to make sure that responsibility is shared. That's the entire purpose of creating an organization, is to distribute responsibility amongst a group of people. Otherwise, we would all just be freelancers doing what we want to do. The other thing that I think about trust is I am also I feel a very strong sense of responsibility for the dollars that nonprofit organizations or charities take to do our work. So it doesn't mean we work for the donors necessarily. We representing our communities, but if I take money to do a particular project, then I have an obligation to make sure that those dollars are extremely well spent, because that's money that didn't go to an organization other than mine, and it didn't go to a different project. And so for me, making sure that that sense of responsibility and the trust that others have placed in me is baked in from the beginning of the fundraising cycle just helps us remember what this money really means.
Yeah, beautifully said. Great question we have from Danielle. I'm just going to read this to you. I work with an organization that has very wide mandate. In order to deliver on that mandate, our organization needs to scale up. But we're dealing with a really eager but new to the profession staff. We have good relationship with funders, but we're not raising enough to sustain a large staff load needed to deliver. What would you recommend as the first steps to prioritize? Great question, Danielle. Krystyn, over to you.
Yeah, from an internal perspective, you do need to make sure that you've got the procedures in place to replicate the work, to train people, and to support people who are doing the work. So if you are going to take more money to do more work, you have to have the capacity to deliver on that promise of what it is that you're going to do. So you may feel pressure to scale, but I would say resist the pressure to scale until you know exactly what you're scaling. This is what we're doing. This is the training and the support program that's in place. This is the management team that's in place to support or to facilitate that shift. And then focus on raising more money. If you've got a compelling case for growth or for scaling, I would also say the first thing to ask for is ask for money to facilitate that organizational transition. So that the funder knows that what they're investing in and supporting is some of those capacity building pieces, but they're not expecting you to run too far, too fast.
Yeah, no, great point for sure. Natasha's asking a great question as well. I know we need to scale, but we're challenged with limited resources. How do you suggest we scale when we have such limited funding and grants, and they don't typically cover fundraising salaries? She's saying it's a catch-22. We have limited funds, which is why we need a fundraiser, but we don't have any funds to pay them. I mean, this is the age-old question, isn't it, Krystyn?
Yeah, around and around and around it goes. So one, I think it depends on what sector you're in. So there are certain types of programs where there really just genuinely is a much, much smaller funding pool available in Canada. And, I work with a lot of environmental organizations who are usually in the smaller slice of the nonprofit funding pie. So there is going to be demand or pressure or support for your programs, but you can't scale them if the financial support isn't there. That's a great case for support for funding, showing people the demand, showing where the expectation and the need is coming from. But there may be a limit to what you can do. So I would suggest taking a longer term view of, instead of looking at, okay, how do we keep up for the next year? Look at maybe the next 3 years and think about, is there a place where we could invest money here? It's risky, but here's where the payoff is. So an example of that would be, you think of for-profit companies that do advertising, or even organizations that do generate a lot of revenue from online donations. They know if they spend $1,000 on advertising, that it will generate $2,000 or $3,000 in revenue. So while you do need that seed money up front to pay for that initial investment, there's a return on investment that makes that a worthwhile risk to take. So if you know that you are ready for that next level, and you know that the support is out there to justify and sustain it, it's accepting that initial startup is a risk, and there is going to be some risk there, and then taking that risk, informed with your eyes wide open, but there is no way to do it that is perfectly safe feeling every step of the way. Yeah.
And Natasha just added here, she says, completely understand, we just lack seed funding, which is the real issue. And we hear that, I certainly hear that for a lot from my clients as well. Krystyn, I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, and it's just making the pitch and knowing that it may take time. It's definitely challenging, but don't give up, and don't give up, and don't think that if people say it can't be done, that it can't be done. We talked about diversifying fundraising and revenue, and it may be that there aren't funds available through traditional funding mechanisms for something that you're doing because you want to do something new, or you want to be a new person or face in an organization. But finding new ways to do it or different ways to do it, persistence is really the only thing that works.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked a little bit, I heard you talking a little bit about measuring and really understanding that. What kind of measurement tools do you think are best?
So the first step in measurement, which I think I had a little note on one of the slides, is thinking about what you want to measure at the beginning of a project. It's so much easier to figure it out or to set it up at the beginning than it is to try to do it at the end of a project. You don't need 50 or 60 different impact measures if you've been looking at some of the spreadsheets or the guides that are out there. I would say for most projects and organizations, aside from the financial measures that you need to report, probably, fewer than 10 are fine, and probably only 3 is what you're actually going to care about on a project. Then how you capture that information depends on what those measures are. So just look for ways in the day-to-day operations of your organization to figure out, oh, if we kept track of this, then we would have the impact measure we need. So for example, if one of the things that you want to report on is how many acres of wetland did you restore or protect, then whoever it is that's doing the science reports or the field reports, just make sure that they know to flag that information for you, because they already have to write it down or note it somewhere. If you want to report on how many people are attending your webinars, then whoever organizes the webinars, if it's an ops person or a communications person, just make sure that they're downloading the registration and attendance sheet when it's all over. And then all the data that you need is being captured through work that you're already doing. So that's why looking at impact measurement at the beginning is helpful. And then as you do the work, remembering that each of those measures tells a story. So we're not counting the number of people who attended a webinar because we think 50 is better than 43. It's because behind those 50 names, there are 50 stories, or there's at least one story about someone, an organization doing some work that attended for a reason, that's trying to accomplish a goal. And so letting people know that you're always looking for those stories, share them at your staff meetings, build that storytelling into your day-to-day work, and then have someone just making notes. Again, that can be an admin person or whoever it is that does your meeting notes. Just every time there's one of these anecdotal stories, capture it, put it in a Google Doc or whatever is just very, very simple, not a lot of technology required, and then use those to tell your story later.
Yeah, I love the qualitative and quantitative that you just mentioned, because I think so often we're just looking at the numbers, but the stories, like we were built to hear stories, right? We weren't built like there's no cave where it's like 4 + 4, right? The cave stories are telling a story for a reason, and it goes way back to those days where we were telling each other stories. So that's wonderful. We have another question here. I'm just going to share this one with you. Any advice on pitching more innovative projects for funding, such as art to communicate and engage around climate change? That's from Danielle.
Yeah, I used to joke that for certain funders, the more traditional funders, that innovation is great and creativity is bad. So one thing is recognizing that if you're talking to traditional funders, what you need to show them is that the thing that you're doing works, and it's like something that they know and are familiar with this one thing changed. So 90% of what you're doing is the same as something that they believe in and trust. And here's the little innovation that you're adding onto the side. An example of that that's very straightforward would be when companies started selling those mattresses in a box that come to your home. It's a mattress for a bed, which everyone already knows and everyone already needs. And then the one little innovation is that this one fits in a box, so you don't have to go to the store. So for traditional funders, they want that familiarity, that trust, because that's what trust is to them, and then the twists that you bring to it. If what you're doing, it's really important to highlight the innovation or the creativity, look for less traditional funders, and either go to the crowd. So go online or go to the community and try to get a lot of small amounts of support from a lot of different people. That can be one way to do it. The public is often much more receptive and responsive than established funders, because they can see a video or hear your message, like it, click a button, and give you their support. Or if you're targeting people, make sure you've got a good story about why you picked them. And they might not be in the grant databases. They might be mentioned in newspaper articles, or you might see them at all of the community events in your area. And when you talk to them, say, look, the thing that we're doing is unique and important for these reasons. And we specifically think you're a good funder because we've seen the way that you talk passionately about this topic, or the way that you support these other initiatives. And if you're really uncertain of whether or not they would be a funder, just ask them for advice. say, we've seen you involved in projects like this in the past, and we would love it if you could offer some advice or some wisdom to help us figure out how to make this work for ourselves. And they open doors for you, or they may become a funder themselves. So you're sort of half scaling and half fundraising at the same time.
I love that. I love that. I've always, I heard that analogy about 20 years ago. If you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money, which I always thought was really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So we've got, lots of great feedback here. Lots of thank yous to you, Krystyn, for sharing. When I think about, just the different revenue streams, I think one fairly untapped one is plan giving. And some people really struggle to do this if they're one sort of hat jobs. Talk to me a little bit about, many people wearing hats, I should say, various hats and trying to do it all. Talk to me a little bit about plan giving and the opportunity to scale up that way, because some of those transformational gifts we won't see for a decade, but I'm starting to hear about ones that I worked on a decade ago, and a decade doesn't seem that long ago. Does that make sense?
It's true. There's for organizations that are really struggling right now, talking to donors about gifts that may come in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years may feel like it is, a long way off, but that's where senior leadership and boards do have obligations to think about the organization's future and not just the day-to-day. So planned giving is, a great tool for people that might want to make an end-of-life gift. It can be something that can be very complicated and not complicated, but professional. It requires lawyers, it requires documentations, but there are specialists that you can work with or that you could bring in to coach you to set that type of program up initially, and it will pay off in the future. So it is a great way to kind of build out your future diversified fundraising so that the people in your organization 10 years from now aren't trying to raise 100% of their budget every year for the first time over and over and over again. You're building that base layer of funds and support. It's also an example of what is a professional specialization for fundraising. And if you aren't familiar with the different types of fundraising, just spending a couple of hours online, Association of Fundraising Professionals or some other fundraising website will show you the basics of, there are people who specialize in events. There are people who specialize in planned giving. There are people who specialize in membership. There's people who specialize in major donors. Like, it's not just raise me money. That these are areas of professional specialization that you could either develop yourself or find coaches or advice and figure out which ones are the best fit with your organization, your skill set, and your culture.
Yeah, very, very well said. I always try to say whenever I'm sharing about fundraising is, what would you have wanted the fundraiser of 2014 to do for you in 2024? And what can you do in 2024 for the fundraiser of 2034? So, I mean, it could be planned giving, it could be something like maybe this is the year to scale up, like you talked about. I mean, there's lots of different ways that people can get involved. We only have about we only have a couple minutes, but it's went by so fast. Bust a myth for me. So, is there any myth that you think about scaling up is out there and we can bust it for people?
Oh. Well, I think one is the easy myth that you may have heard from a well-meaning board member or advisor who says, just hire a fundraiser and then money will fall from the sky. There's organizational infrastructure and strategic leadership that has to happen in order to scale. But then the other one is the story that we tell ourselves if you're one of those people that's feeling stuck, that I'm the only one who can do this. If I don't do this, then all these bad things will happen. The myth to bust is that's true because it's not. There are ways to spread the work and the responsibility around. It will require shifts in the organization and the mentality, but it is absolutely better on the other side of that than it is when you're standing at the bottom of the mountain staring at the top and it feels like you can't conquer it. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, beautifully said. We have time for one more question. If there's anything anyone wants to ask, I'm just going to zip in here. Actually, Hannah's just written a great suggestion. And also another suggestion regarding lack of money for paid staff. Many universities and colleges have volunteer programs and eager students that could help you possibly build a relationship to get more volunteer help that could possibly help to run some programs. It's important to make sure you have the necessary supports for that volunteer engagement, specific projects and asks, etc., to be clear for those wanting to be more involved. So leveraging those volunteers is important as well, Krystyn.
Yeah, volunteers, paid interns, Canada Summer Jobs Grants, other jobs grants. Those are incredibly valuable resources for organizations. If you don't have money for salaries, there are a fair number of subsidies available for full or part-time work in the nonprofit sector that can be transformative for your organization. And I do think what you said, Sam, about what would you wish the people 10 years before you had done to prepare you for the moment you're at. So thinking about when you're scaling, pressure to grow, it feels like we don't have time, but we do have time. And it is worth putting the pieces in place so that when you grow, it is sustainable and stable. It is going to like scaling, not linear. You are going to move 2 steps forward and 1 step back and 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. Everything isn't going to be a forward momentum. So it's worth making sure that you're standing on solid ground before you take the next step.
Yeah, beautifully said. I learned so much from you today. Thank you. This has been a wonderful opportunity. And I know today has been recorded, and an opportunity if somebody wanted to share with a colleague, or watch it again, or come up with some great resources. That's wonderful. Krystyn, you did a great job today. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for everyone for joining in and your questions and comments in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And wonderful thanks as well to the lovely Julie and Hannah, who make everything run so beautifully here at CBI. We're getting ready for June, everybody. When I say that, I can't even believe it's going to be June. June's coming quick. We're going to be together on June 26th. I look forward to it very much. We look forward to seeing all of you then. Share all the information as well with your friends and colleagues. Lots of great folks joining us today from Ottawa and all over the country. Thank you so much. A special shout out to Tim, my new mentee through the AFP Future program. It's great to see Tim here. And to all of you, thanks for being here, because we just wouldn't be here if you weren't here. I'm Sam Laprade. Thanks for joining us from the Capacity Building Institute. Stay safe, everyone. Bye.